Breathing techniques have long been recognized for their calming effects, but as the insightful video suggests that you're watching, they can also be used as a tool for harnessing adrenaline, the hormone that boosts our alertness, focus, and motivation. One such technique involves inhaling deeply through the nose, holding the breath, and then slowly inhaling through the mouth, all to a count of 4.
Single best thing you can do for your sleep, your energy, your mood, your wakefulness, your metabolism is to get natural light in your eyes early in the day. Don't wear sunglasses to do it. It takes about 10 minutes or so. If you live in a cloudy area, if you're in the UK in the winter, yes.
Or the summer,
maybe you resort to some artificial light as a replacement.
After just a few minutes, this simple exercise can help stimulate an adrenaline rush, pushing you past lethargy and into action. That's just the first step in using breath work to unlock your potential. The power of breath is pretty profound, as outlined in the video, and it can be harnessed to induce adrenaline, thus elevating heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing rate.
So it is very hard to control the mind with the mind, and I think a simple rule that people can adopt is when your mind is not where you want it to be, look to your body. Use the body to shift the mind. It's a simple equation. It's sometimes hard to do because thoughts can be so all-encompassing. But when your mind is not where you want it to be, if you don't feel as happy or you're obsessing, you need to go to a mechanical system in the body, because if you do that, you'll shift the chemicals that are released in your brain in a way that will allow you to regain control of the steering wheel. So there are a couple things that can do that immediately. The most basic one and the simplest one is going to be with respiration, with breathing. So breathing and the neurons that control breathing are so interesting because they are constantly working. They work reflexively all the time. They're working right now. If you're alive and you're listening to this, they're working. A few years ago, when my laboratory got interested in studying stress in humans, we asked ourselves, what are the patterns of breathing that allow for the most rapid reduction in stress levels? And more importantly, what are the patterns of breathing that can be done in real time so that people can adjust their stress while they're still engaging in life, right? Breathwork classes, running off to Esalen for a weekend is a magical experience, but life demands pressing on you. That's typically when you feel stressed. So it is still true that vacation, long meditation retreats, and massages or a nice drink, if you're of drinking age, still work, but they're slow and they take you offline. The physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that was actually discovered by physiologists in the 30s, and that was essentially rediscovered by Professor Jack Feldman at UCLA, a world expert in the neurobiology of respiration, and by my colleague Mark Krasno at Stanford, who studies lung function. So if your mind is not where you want it to be, whether or not you're trying to sleep or work or focus or anything, I'm a big fan of this physiological sigh, which was discovered by physiologists in the 1930s. It's a double inhale through the nose and a long exhale that follows. The exhale can be done through the mouth or through the nose. If you're one of these people who can't breathe through your nose, you could do this all through your mouth. So it's just to inhale and then inhale again, even if you're just sneaking in a little bit more air, and then long exhale. The physiological sigh is known to physiologists and neuroscientists as a way to offload a lot of what's called carbon dioxide, and it immediately produces a heightened sense of calm or a reduced sense of stress and alertness. It's not going to put you to sleep right away, but I'll just do it just by way of example so people can see, since it always looks funny to breathe and, by example for some reason. And no, you don't have to close your eyes in order to breathe. You can breathe with your eyes open. So it's just right. So it's inhale, inhale, long exhale. The first one I can just summarize by saying was extremely somatic, waves of a lot of shaking. Yeah. At the beginning of the session, I walked in feeling like I could think and feel things from the neck up. I could think and feel things, or not think, but I could feel things from the waist down, but that my body wasn't integrated as a system. Yeah. I left that session feeling completely comfortable in my body as a whole system and far more in tune with my emotions. Far more comfortable having emotions, far less afraid of what emotions might do to me, whether or not they were evoked from inside or from outside. As a consequence, I felt much braver in the world. And I felt a kind of a healthy adaptive level of fearlessness, because I felt like nothing can hijack my internal emotions. And even if they do, I'll be okay. And that was a significant thing. The second session, very different. I expected everything as I did in the first. Never works that way. Was one of deep, deep, deep acceptance around forgiveness of resents that I had for people that I felt had neglected me or did not do what they needed to do, or that I felt a lot of, and you might be able to sense a little bit of emotion here. It's hard because I can still sense the ways in which thoughts about that are painful, but mostly because it seems so senseless to me now.
Yeah.
And yet I have truly zero resent. Like I look for it often to just check myself. No resent, like complete forgiveness, which has given me tremendous relief.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third session was interesting. Third session was a higher dose. I had never taken the booster, the MAPS booster. Took the booster and I lay completely still for about 8 hours, and it was very introspective. And I think I left that session and I still maintained from everything I've described, by the way, I feel I've maintained years later now. The third session, which was more recent, I felt I finally understood and kind of sealed up what I can only describe as like boundaries. Having a strong neck, why is that so important? Well, it's important because you want a strong spine, and it's the upper portion of your spine. The other thing that I notice that it does is it completely changes my psychology to train my neck. I just naturally stand more upright.
Yeah.
I find it easier to look people in the eye. It's not hard for me to look people directly in the eye when I speak to them, but I find I just have like my posture and presence is just better in a chair or standing when I train my neck. And I think it's because my head isn't, let's just use the word again, it's not, flaccid falling of the chin towards the chest. That word just freaks everybody out. Ashwagandha is a very potent suppressor of cortisol. There's some evidence it can indirectly increase testosterone, but probably through suppression of cortisol, since those are in the same synthesis pathway. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen. Ashwagandha, because it lowers cortisol, should probably be taken late day, not early day, because you want cortisol high.
Yep.
Ashwagandha, as a cortisol suppressing adaptogen, probably also should not be taken in high amounts, not low amounts, but in high amounts, meaning 400 to 600 milligrams prior to exercise, because the whole goal of exercise is to trigger the adaptation through a spike in cortisol, or one of the goals. Rhodiola rosea is a very interesting compound because it's an adaptogen in that it greatly reduces perceived effort and allows for greater power output and endurance output, as you pointed out a moment ago. But it does not do that by suppressing cortisol. So 200 milligrams of rhodiola rosea prior to, say, a resistance training workout, or even on one of your
ski touring days,
you will notice you have more vigor. You can just go longer and your perceived effort is much lower. And it's kind of striking.
What is it doing?
Now, this is interesting. It's kind of striking how after the workout, you don't feel as depleted. That perhaps the main reason I started taking it is I found I could train harder, but then I suffered quite a lot from a post-exercise dip in energy, especially if I ate a big meal. I no longer experience that if I take rhodiola rosea 30 to 60 minutes before a workout. The effects of it last about 4 hours. So what's happening during that workout? It's clearly having an effect on the central nervous system by reducing the total amount of adrenaline that's released, or the efficacy of adrenaline, epinephrine, during high intensity effort or long duration effort. Example of craving is actually what you crave. You crave the feeling of craving. Is beautiful because what it means is that you don't allow yourself to go so far down the arc of the dopamine trajectory to get to the other source of motivation. So there are two sources of motivation as it relates to dopamine, and then we can think about tools that we could export from these that are nested in neurobiology. The first is to do what you do, which is to be able to sense the craving as its own form of pleasure. This has kind of remnants of Carol Dweck's growth mindset, that you eventually develop a pleasure in the seeking and the striving. Has has flavors of a David Goggins type approach where it seems like he gets pleasure from the friction itself. And so there are elements of that. You seem to have that as well. But if you can start to identify the craving as its own internally released drug, this thing dopamine, that is a source of motivation, then what you realize is that capturing the reward is wonderful, but attaching dopamine to the reward is actually a little bit dangerous.
Attaching.
Yeah,
this is
celebrating the win more than the pursuit it actually sets you up for failure in the future. And so this gets us right into something called dopamine reward prediction error. And reward prediction error is basically if you expect something to be really great, and then it's not quite that great, your dopamine baseline lowers. And now understanding what we know about dopamine, that means that not only did you feel as if you lost because it wasn't as much a celebration as you thought it would be, but it also means that you're starting from a lower place, meaning you are less motivated.
Physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that we all engage in deep sleep when levels of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream get too high. We, or our dogs, you can see your dog do this, will do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale. Children or adults for that matter that are sobbing and lose their breath, so to speak, will also do a double inhale exhale. That's the spontaneous execution of what we call the physiological sigh. The reason it works so well to relax us is because it offloads a lot of carbon dioxide all at once. And the way it works is the following. Our lungs are not just two big bags of air. We have all these little millions of sacs of air that if we were to lay them out flat, they would be as big as about a tennis court or so. The volume of air, therefore, and the volume of carbon dioxide that we can offload is tremendously high, except that we get stressed as carbon dioxide builds up on our bloodstream, and as kind of a double whammy, these little sacs deflate. Now, when we do a double inhale, so I'll do this now twice through my nose, or you could do this, or you could do it through your mouth, but it works best through the nose. It's inhale, and then you sneak a little bit more air in at the very end. When you do that, you reinflate those little sacs. And when you exhale, then you discard all the carbon dioxide at once.
Right. So I don't know. I like to think everybody harbors it inside themselves. I can say without going into the whole backstory, because I've done it before. I mean, at 19, I basically just looked at myself and decided that I was a loser, right? I mean, I was able-bodied, which was helpful. I had a mind that could remember things, which was helpful. I was interested in a few things, but none of those things were setting me up for career or ongoing progress. And I had a lot of maladaptive behaviors, right? At the time, I was getting involved in fighting. I wasn't completing my schoolwork. I was just really in a bad place. And it was really fear and desperation, mostly fear, that inspired the switch. Along the way, I haven't talked about this publicly, to any great extent, but along the way, I hit numerous roadblocks again and again. Sometimes they were situational, like people close to me dying and the grief that came with that. Sometimes it was my own kind of feeling like I was getting pulled back toward a state of mind that wasn't healthy for me, and so on. But I think what I've been good at least good at, not great at, but at least good at, is finding really good mentors that would allow me to get to the next node, the next milestone. And I should say that some of those mentors were real people that I didn't say, can you be my mentor? Not that that would be a bad thing, but really tried to model my behavior after people that I respected. And sometimes those mentors were people that I didn't know at all. I mean, I'll just say this right now. I'm going to embarrass him by saying it, but I was a junior professor, meaning before I got tenure, running a lab. I had a bulldog puppy, a laboratory, and a home for the first time in my life, and feeling very, very overwhelmed and distraught. And I made many of the things that I heard Tim Ferriss say sort of central to my way of doing things. I didn't go 4 hours of work a week, but I did start to get extreme about organizing my schedule. I have really tried to adopt this idea that when it's inevitable, and it will inevitably arrive, that stress grows us, that it really sharpens decision-making. It really sharpens decision-making. And, if you have a very stressful event and then you recover from it, the worst thing to do is just go and keep going. You need to take some time and reflect about what led into that. So I think I'm very good at leveraging fear into positive change. If I really think about most of the major shifts in my life, I'm scared as hell to remain in this situation, and I'm very good at broadcasting fear into my future. If I've ever been in a bad relationship, it was clearly, if I stayed in, it couldn't have been so bad that I felt like I had to leave. So I would broadcast and project, how horrible it would be for my future children. And I might even build that up a little bit in my system. Now, one could say, well, maybe you could have navigated it successfully. I'm better at projecting fear into my future. And that has led me to make, I think, better and better decisions over time.